She worked during the day and studied at night, until a billionaire believed in her. Before we dive into this captivating story, we invite you to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support our work. We hope you enjoy it. On the vast grounds of a stately estate nestled in the rolling hills of rural Virginia, surrounded by centuries-old oaks, the night had cloaked every corner of the Harrington mansion in a deep, respectful silence. It was past 2 in the morning when a faint light broke through the darkness, coming from the kitchen in the east wing. The house, a legacy passed down through generations of a family once entwined with politics and high finance, still echoed the grandeur of past times, now reduced to the methodical ticking of the old grandfather clock in the main hallway. Benjamin Harrington, tech magnate and current owner of the estate, descended the staircase slowly, dressed in a dark cotton robe and slippers that barely muffled the soft creak of his steps on the worn wooden floor. His eyes, long adjusted to the dimness of sleepless nights, squinted slightly at the unexpected light. He had been expecting yet another bout of insomnia, as he had for many nights since solitude became a quiet companion in his routine. Tea at 9, investment reports at 10, followed by a restless vigil starting shortly after midnight. But that night, something out of the ordinary pulled him away from the predictable rhythm. Crossing the corridor toward the kitchen, Benjamin came to a sudden stop at a sight entirely unfamiliar to him. Sitting at the marble counter, hunched over a pile of thick books and notebooks filled with detailed notes, was Emily Carter, the young housemaid who worked in the mansion. She wore a worn-out wool sweater over her plain uniform, sleeves rolled up, and a loose strand of hair slipping from her makeshift bun as she focused intently on complex medical diagrams. Emily didn't notice Benjamin's presence. So absorbed was she in the intricacies of the human cardiovascular system and the biochemical reactions described in the manuals before her. He cleared his throat, more out of instinct than necessity. Emily jolted instantly. Her pencil slipped from her fingers and rolled to the edge of the counter. Startled, she quickly closed the nearest book and stood up in a hurry, murmuring an almost inaudible apology. Benjamin, however, raised his hand gently, signaling that there was no need to apologize. He explained that he had only come down to get a glass of water. Still, his gaze remained fixed on the books and notebooks spread before her, curiosity quietly stirring within him. In a natural tone, he asked what had her studying so intently at such a late hour. Somewhat embarrassed, Emily explained she was preparing for an entrance exam for an online pre-med program. Her voice carried a sincerity that immediately captured Benjamin's attention. She shared that in-person classes were financially out of reach, and her only hope was to excel in the remote course and perhaps earn a scholarship to medical school. The titles of the books, Advanced Human Anatomy, Basic Pharmacology, Introduction to Physiology, left no doubt about the seriousness of her preparation. Impressed, Benjamin asked if she was hoping to become a nurse. Emily looked up, and in her eyes burned a fierce sense of conviction. "No," she replied, with a firmness that surprised him coming from someone with such a delicate appearance. "I want to be a doctor." She revealed that the dream had taken root early in life, back in her small hometown of Huntsville, Alabama. Her father, sick and without access to proper treatment, had died before their eyes, unable to afford quality care. Since then, the silent promise to save lives had beat inside her like a second heart. Benjamin took in every word, moved by the raw honesty of her story. Emily wasn't asking for pity, nor was she trying to justify herself. She simply shared her truth, with the quiet dignity of someone who bore deep scars but refused to be defined by them. After a contemplative pause, Benjamin made a subtle gesture, indicating she could return to her studies. Emily hesitated, surprised by the unexpected permission, but soon turned back to her books, driven by the urgency of her dream. As he walked away, Benjamin cast one last glance in her direction. He watched that young woman, exhausted but relentless, facing the constraints of her reality with quiet bravery. And for the first time in what felt like ages, something flickered within him, an authentic admiration, discreet but steadily growing, that would soon begin to change not just Emily Carter's life, but his own as well. Before the first rays of sunlight reached the vineyards surrounding the Harrington estate, Emily Carter was already on her feet, swiftly tying her hair back and slipping on the worn-out sneakers that accompanied her through the long hours of each day. Benjamin Harrington's estate, with its classic architecture and manicured gardens, still seemed to be resting peacefully at that hour. But Emily knew it wouldn't be long before the day demanded every ounce of energy she had. Her day began in the kitchen, where she organized the utensils with near-military precision. She washed the dishes from the night before, prepped the mise-en place for breakfast, and restocked the fruit bowl with fresh oranges picked from the estate's orchard. Then she moved on to the main rooms, dusting the mahogany furniture and polishing the wooden floors that reflected the soft light coming through the colonial windows. Throughout each task, her mind remained elsewhere, not on the chores themselves, but on the subjects she studied during the few hours she managed to steal from her exhaustion. While scrubbing the counters, she mentally recited medical terminology. As she aligned the silverware for the formal dinner later that evening, she rehearsed diagnoses and basic procedures. It was an act of resilience, a mental discipline that turned every movement of the day into training for the future she so fiercely wanted. Emily was acutely aware of how different the world around her was from the one she envisioned for herself. The high walls of the mansion, the crystal chandeliers, and the Persian rugs beneath her feet were constant reminders of the distance between her current life and the dream of becoming a doctor. Still, she refused to see that distance as insurmountable. In the late afternoons, while tending to the flowers in the garden courtyard, she allowed herself, if only briefly, to daydream. As she touched the petals of the blue hydrangeas or trimmed the branches of the hibiscus that framed the entrance, it felt, if just for a moment, like a kind of healing. She was nurturing life around her in the same way she hoped to one day heal human lives. Benjamin Harrington, for his part, increasingly noticed these small acts of dedication. From his office window, he watched as Emily cleaned the veranda with the same care a surgeon might give to a delicate procedure. He had also seen, more than once, when she quietly left pain relievers for the older gardener, who often complained of aching joints, or when she rearranged ingredients in the kitchen to make the cook's job easier. There was something genuinely kind in Emily, a quiet attentiveness that might go unnoticed by anyone not paying close attention. But Benjamin, intrigued since that night in the kitchen, had begun to look beyond the surface. At night, after all her tasks were done, Emily would retreat to her small room near the laundry area. There, at a makeshift desk crafted from salvaged wooden boards, she opened her books with reverence, as if they were portals to another world. The dim light from her lamp fought back the darkness, illuminating pages filled with notes and scribbles. The estate's internet connection, occasionally unreliable, tested her patience. Emily would wait for the lecture videos to reload, never losing her calm. She took a deep breath, used the forced pauses to mentally review what she'd studied, and resumed her focus the moment the screen came back to life. Some nights were especially hard. On those nights, memories of her mother battling a chronic illness and of her younger siblings still depending on her financial support made the air feel heavier. But then Emily would draw strength from her youngest sister Lily's messages and from the drawings sent by her little brother Joshua, who always portrayed her as a heroic doctor surrounded by grateful patients. Those reminders kept her flame alive, even when her eyes burned with fatigue and her hands ached from endless writing. Outside, Benjamin continued to watch her quietly, growing more and more impressed. He saw the superhuman effort she made to balance grueling work with the pursuit of a dream that, to most, would seem unreachable. She always hid her books when she sensed him approaching, as if afraid of being reprimanded for studying during the wrong time. But contrary to what she feared, Benjamin felt a deep and growing respect for her, almost reverent. He was beginning to realize that standing before him wasn't just a diligent and efficient employee. She was a woman who, against all odds, refused to accept the limits the world tried to impose on her. Emily wasn't just a quiet presence in the Harrington mansion. She was a force in motion, and Benjamin was beginning to sense that perhaps he had a far more important role to play in her journey than he'd first imagined. Mornings at Benjamin Harrington's estate followed a precise and predictable rhythm. Soft light filtered through the wide windows, casting golden patterns across the polished wooden floors and the white columns that framed the charm of the southern mansion. But for Benjamin, the familiarity of routine had started to take on new contours ever since that night he had found Emily Carter immersed in her medical books. Now his eyes, once indifferent, were drawn to details that would go unnoticed by anyone else in the house. He noticed, for instance, the patient, almost maternal way Emily tended to the garden's plants, caring for the rose bushes as if each bud carried a personal meaning. He noticed, too, the nearly invisible gestures, how she wrapped thick cloths around pot handles to protect the cook's hands, or how she discreetly left a glass of water for the aging gardener who struggled with arthritis on colder days. To Benjamin, these weren't just signs of kindness. They were evidence of a soul that found value in small acts of care, well beyond the obligations of her job. Emily carried within her an internal compass that consistently pointed toward the well-being of others. For a man used to the impersonal world of major corporations and cold financial transactions, this was beginning to stir a quiet but growing unease, an emotional movement he hadn't felt in years. The days went by, and with them, Benjamin's curiosity spilled beyond the bounds of simple observation. He gradually began to initiate casual interactions with Emily, always discreet, always respectful. One day, as she was polishing the chandeliers in the dining room, he asked how long she had worked there. "Almost 4 years, Mr. Harrington," Emily replied, remaining focused on her task but allowing a faint, polite smile to form. "And before that?" he asked, genuinely interested. Emily explained that she had worked in a few homes in Charleston, always as a live-in employee, as that allowed her to save nearly her entire paycheck to support her mother and younger siblings back in Alabama. Her tone was matter-of-fact, free of embellishment, but rich in honesty. Benjamin appreciated that. There was no trace of self-pity or a plea for sympathy, just the facts, plain and unvarnished, as life tends to be for those who learn to fight early on. One Sunday morning, Benjamin saw her returning from the local market, carrying heavy bags of groceries. She could have waited for the household driver, as was customary, but had chosen to walk. What caught Benjamin's attention, however, was when she stopped in the garden before heading to the kitchen. There, she handed the gardener a small jar of analgesic cream, mentioning it might help ease his joint pain. It was a simple act, but it resonated deeply with Benjamin. There was a kind of humanity in it that clashed with the icy pragmatism of the business world he knew so well. That evening, Benjamin found Emily once again absorbed in her studies, seated at the end of a long table in the laundry area. now converted into a makeshift office. Instead of walking past, he approached her, curiosity pulling him closer. "Don't let me interrupt," he said gently, noticing how she rushed to close her notebooks. "Please go on." Emily hesitated, but seeing the sincerity in his expression, she relaxed and returned to her studies. He sat across from her, driven by a sudden impulse he couldn't quite explain. "Do you miss home?" he asked, his voice low, blending with the soft hum of the heater. She looked up at him, pausing before answering. "Every day," she admitted with disarming honesty. "But everything I need to change my story is right here, in these books, in the opportunity I'm trying to create." Her response, full of conviction, stirred something in Benjamin beyond simple admiration. In that moment, he didn't just see a determined young woman juggling housework and study. He saw a transformative force, something he hadn't believed in for a long time. From then on, a kind of quiet ritual formed between them. Benjamin began to discreetly bring an extra cup of coffee to the corner where Emily studied at night. "This one has sugar," he said one evening, handing her the mug. "I wasn't sure how you liked it." She accepted it with a soft smile, grateful for the unexpected kindness. These nighttime encounters became small, but meaningful pauses in their respective battles. Their conversations were brief but profound, almost as if every word exchanged carried more weight than long speeches. Emily, always honest, would share fragments of her life, stories of her mother fighting illness, of her siblings still in school, and of how each study page brought her closer to a future where she could help them all. Benjamin, in turn, listened with genuine attention, feeling strangely renewed by each of her confidences. It wasn't pity he felt. It was deep respect, paired with an admiration that was slowly becoming something more. Something he, a pragmatic man accustomed to having full control, wasn't ready to name, but which grew steadily inside him, night after night. Without realizing it, an invisible thread had begun to form between them, stitched together by quiet silences and spontaneous gestures. It was the beginning of something neither of them could yet fully recognize, but which, inevitably, was already changing them both. Winter had begun to announce itself in Virginia with gusts of icy wind that swept through the trees surrounding Harrington Estate, scattering a thick carpet of dry leaves along the gravel paths. The days were shorter, the air colder, but inside the mansion, something quietly defied the season's chill, the steadily growing closeness between Benjamin and Emily. On a particularly cold afternoon, Benjamin asked Emily to meet him in the library, a rarely used room lined with deep reddish-wood shelves, filled with volumes of classic literature and business manuals passed down through generations of the Harrington family. Surprised by the request, Emily entered with her usual calm demeanor, though a faint tension flickered in her eyes. It wasn't common for Benjamin to summon her for anything unrelated to household matters. He stood near the fireplace, holding a leather folder worn by time. With a gentle gesture, he motioned for her to sit across from him. "Don't worry, Emily," he said, offering a reassuring half-smile. "This isn't about work." Curious and slightly apprehensive, she took the seat in front of him. Benjamin opened the folder and pulled out several documents. Emily's breath caught when she recognized the logo of a local community hospital at the top of the pages. "I arranged a volunteer position for you with the support program at St. Mary's Community Hospital," Benjamin explained, placing the papers on the table with casual composure, though his eyes were fixed on hers, waiting for a reaction. "On Saturdays, if you'd like, you'll be able to assist the team, observe basic procedures, help with organization, learn directly from real professionals." The words hung in the air for a moment. Emily brought her hand to her mouth, stunned. This wasn't just an opportunity. It was her first real step into a hospital environment. a window opening into the world she had always dreamed of reaching. Mr. Harrington, Emily's voice trembled slightly, the emotion in it unmistakable despite her effort to contain it. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept, he replied softly, a sincere smile tugging at his lips. She smiled back, small but genuine, and nodded, a new spark in her eyes that Benjamin couldn't help but notice. From the following Saturday on, Emily began attending the community hospital. She wore simple, discreet clothing, but carried herself with the poise of someone who belonged. Under the guidance of the head nurse, the energetic Brenda McAllister, Emily assisted with patient intake, organized medical charts, and offered kind words whenever she could. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed. Before long, doctors and nurses began to trust her with basic tasks, recognizing the hunger in her to learn. Benjamin, though he never accompanied her, waited eagerly for her weekly updates. Their evening conversations after each volunteer shift became cherished moments for both of them. One night, Emily returned to the mansion with a tired but radiant smile. She found Benjamin in the library, as if he'd been waiting for her. "Today I helped an elderly woman understand her medication form," she said, her eyes glowing with quiet pride. "She thanked me like I'd saved her life." Benjamin listened to every word as if receiving a rare gift. Her enthusiasm seemed to awaken something in him that had long been dormant. "Because to her you did," he replied, his voice softer now, almost intimate. His words lingered between them, full of meaning. Emily felt a slight flush rise to her cheeks, caught off guard by the depth behind them. For a moment, their eyes met with a quiet intensity that said more than any formal conversation could. Little by little, the lines between employer and employee began to blur, not from carelessness, but from the natural evolution of their connection. Professional respect remained unshaken, but now it was joined by something more. Mutual admiration, slowly warming into something deeper, more personal, more human. Benjamin, typically reserved, began allowing himself small gestures. A cup of tea left for her on colder nights, an anatomy book thoughtfully placed on her makeshift desk. Emily, in turn, started looking at him differently, not just as the man who had given her a chance, but as someone whose presence softened the silence of her nights. Nothing had been said aloud, not yet, but they both felt that something was changing, something that, like spring quietly following a harsh winter, could no longer be ignored. The weeks at St. Mary's Community Hospital passed in a blur for Emily. Every Saturday opened a new window into the world she had dreamed of for years. The bustling hallways, the hurried voices of doctors, the persistent beeping of heart monitors. What might seem chaotic to others was, for her, a symphony, a constant reminder that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Benjamin Harrington listened to her weekly reports with the same anticipation as someone awaiting news from an important expedition. Their Saturday evening talks in the library had become a ritual, a comforting rhythm that ended each week with vivid recounts of Emily's small victories at the hospital. He listened to every detail with an attentiveness that went beyond courtesy. Emily noticed this, and, even more, she felt increasingly motivated by that steady gaze, one that didn't just hear her, but truly saw her. On a cold Monday morning, Benjamin received a phone call that sparked an audacious idea. It was Dr. Andrew Collins, director of an educational foundation and a longtime partner in philanthropic initiatives. As Benjamin listened to Andrew describe a new full-ride scholarship program for students from underprivileged backgrounds, he didn't need to think twice. "I have someone in mind," he said, his voice firm with conviction. In the days that followed, Benjamin quietly gathered all the necessary documents. certificates, Emily's academic history, letters of recommendation from hospital coordinators. She did everything discreetly, mindful of her pride, and by the end of the week, brought the folder back to the library table. That evening, as Emily entered the room warmed by the crackling fireplace, she was met by a look that held something new. Benjamin didn't seem just the generous patron she was slowly coming to know better. There was a spark of anticipation in his expression, as if he were about to share a precious secret with her. "Emily," he began, motioning for her to come closer, "I want you to see this." She sat at the table, hands clasped in her lap, anxious. Benjamin opened the folder, revealing the scholarship application and a provisional acceptance letter, already signed by the Foundation's board. Emily read the words once, then again, unable to slow her racing breath. Her eyes filled with tears the moment she realized what it all meant. "Is it real?" she whispered, overwhelmed. "Very real," Benjamin confirmed, his expression softened by a rare smile of deep satisfaction. "It will cover not only your prep courses for medical school, but also part of your family's expenses, so they'll be secure while you study." Emily couldn't hold back her emotions. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks as she struggled to find the words to express her gratitude. Sensing the storm inside her, Benjamin reached out his hand, not just as a gesture of support, but one of genuine admiration. She took his hand, and the touch was more than a handshake or polite acknowledgement. It was a moment filled with meaning, where words became unnecessary. In that brief contact, both of them felt something warm and unspoken, a confirmation of the connection growing steadily between them. "I don't know how to thank you," Emily murmured, her voice still tight with emotion. "You don't have to," Benjamin replied, meeting her gaze with an intensity that made her heart pound. "Just promise me you'll keep fighting for this dream, and never doubt that you belong in that future." Emily nodded, still holding his hand for a second longer than etiquette might allow. When she finally let go, the air between them felt charged, as if something had shifted, no longer just mutual admiration, but something deeper, quietly beginning to take form. That night, as Emily held the folder against her chest, feeling the hopeful weight of a future that now seemed within reach, Benjamin stood watching the door she had just passed through, as if wishing he could hold on to her presence a little longer. A calm certainty rested in his chest. Emily Carter wasn't just a determined young woman chasing an improbable dream. She was, little by little, the person reigniting a flame in him that he had believed long extinguished. And he knew, even if he hadn't yet said it aloud, that he would do whatever it took to keep that light burning. Emily's arrival at the Jefferson College Preparatory Program campus in Charlottesville felt like stepping through a portal into a new world. It was a center of academic excellence, designed to prepare students for admission into the country's top medical schools. The elegant red brick buildings, the century-old trees lining the campus paths, the clusters of students carrying stacks of textbooks. Everything felt both daunting and inspiring. She came with a single, modest suitcase and a folder full of notes, but what weighed the most wasn't in her hands. It was the burden of expectations. Her own, her family's back in Alabama, and now Benjamin Harrington's. She knew she couldn't afford to let them down, not after everything they had sacrificed, so she could be here. From day one, it was clear that the pace of the program would be relentless. Classes started early and ended late, taught by professors who expected nothing short of excellence. Many of Emily's classmates came from elite prep schools and already seemed to have a command of material she was only just beginning to grasp. But she refused to be intimidated. She dove into her studies with the same relentless drive that once fueled her nightly shifts at the Harrington estate. She watched lecture recordings late into the night, took meticulous notes, built elaborate study guides and mind maps, and spent her weekends reviewing every weakness she identified. Each challenge felt like a mountain to climb, and Emily had long since learned that the view from the top was always worth the effort. Benjamin, though physically distant, kept himself quietly informed. He never crossed the line of the discretion he'd always maintained, but he read every report from the foundation, tracking the scholarship students' progress with great attention. More than that, he waited eagerly for the handwritten letters Emily sent him. Letters filled with her weekly discoveries, the obstacles she faced, the little victories she celebrated, and more often, the growing longing for her family and for the Harrington estate, which, to his surprise, she had started referring to as home. It was in one of those letters that Emily allowed herself, for the first time, to step beyond the boundaries of formality. I miss our conversations in the library. There are nights when I close my books and, just for a moment, I catch myself wishing you were here to hear my doubts and discoveries. I know it's silly, but imagining that you're still rooting for me, even from afar, brings me comfort. Benjamin read those words sitting in his office, the letter held between his hands, staring at the paper as if each word carried a quiet glow. A genuine smile curved his lips, and for a moment he closed his eyes, allowing himself to feel the subtle weight of her absence in his now quiet daily routine. Back on campus, Emily's dedication began to draw attention. Initially seen as an outsider, she quickly carved out her place through sheer merit. Her quiet persistence caught the attention of professors and began to inspire even the more skeptical of her peers. Over time, she became a reference point in both practical sessions and academic discussions. The program's midterm evaluations arrived as a trial by fire. Emily faced each one with the same determination that had carried her through her years as a housemaid. When the results were posted, her name appeared among the top of the class. The news echoed not only through the halls of the preparatory center, but also all the way to Benjamin, who, upon hearing it, felt a deep, silent pride. It was as if, by watching Emily blossom, he too was rediscovering something within himself. More than a story of overcoming adversity, Emily was becoming, day by day, living proof that seemingly impossible dreams can take root. When nurtured with courage, perseverance, and perhaps, just perhaps, a bit of faith from those who see our potential before we can see it ourselves. And deep down, Benjamin was beginning to realize something he could no longer ignore. His admiration for Emily Carter had grown into something beyond pride. It was something more personal, more profound, something that returned to his mind with every prolonged silence in the now solitary halls of Harrington Estate. The months of preparation seemed to have passed in the blink of an eye, but Emily knew that not a single day had been easy. Now, with the long-awaited National Medical School entrance exam approaching, every minute had become too precious to waste. Her routine was grueling, immersed in textbooks, with sleep reduced to quick, strategic naps. Meals were often just a rushed snack between reviews of anatomy and physiology. But amid all that near-superhuman intensity, there was one constant that sustained her more than she cared to admit. Benjamin. In the quiet of her dorm room at night, just before turning off the bedside lamp, her thoughts would drift to him. She imagined the Harrington Estate's library, the fireplace lit, the calm conversations that had once warmed her evenings. She remembered the gentle questions he asked, the genuine interest he showed in every one of her answers, and how, even from a distance, he still made her feel less alone in the path she was walking. Across town, Benjamin was experiencing his own quiet restlessness. Emily's absence had become a tangible void at Harrington Estate. The hallways, once merely quiet, now echoed with a kind of emptiness that bordered on cruel. Even the garden, always vibrant in the spring, seemed less alive without her attentive presence tending to the flowers with such care. Her letters had become the highlight of Benjamin's week. He read them with a focused intensity, as if every line was a thread connecting them across the distance. Emily shared her doubts and triumphs with an honesty that warmed his heart. In one of the letters, she wrote, "I wish I could share these study nights with you, here in the Jefferson Library. I miss our quiet conversations, and the way your presence always seemed to lift the weight of my worries, even if just for a few minutes." Benjamin smiled as he read those words, a genuine smile, warmed by an emotion far deeper than admiration. Always so composed, he was beginning to fully acknowledge that what he felt for Emily was no longer just pride. It was something deeper, something that made every memory of her feel like a living presence, vital, irreplaceable. When the day of the exam arrived, Emily sat in the bright exam center, taking a deep breath. The answer sheet before her felt like a towering obstacle, but she would not let fear paralyze her. She thought of her family in Alabama, of all those nights under the dim glow of her lamp, the long hours stolen from sleep, and, inevitably, she thought of Benjamin. She remembered how he looked at her during their library conversations, the calm tone of his voice, and most of all, the words he once spoke to her. "Never doubt that you belong in that future." That memory filled her chest with courage. She moved through the exam with clarity and calm. Each question was a personal battle, and she approached each one with the determination to conquer it. Before handing in her completed exam, she closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting a wave of relief and hope wash over her exhausted mind. Meanwhile, at Harrington Estate, Benjamin spent the day in a state of unusual unease. The clock seemed to move in slow motion. Even in the middle of daily obligations, his thoughts kept returning to Emily. He found himself staring at the library windows, remembering the nights when she had filled that space with her open books and the determination that lit up her eyes. That evening, tired but relieved, Emily wrote him once again. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that needed no embellishment. "Regardless of the outcome, I want you to know that just getting this far is already a victory. And part of that, I owe to you, Benjamin, not only for the opportunities you gave me, but for the belief I always felt in every one of your gestures." Benjamin held the letter in his hands for a long time, absorbing each word with the care of someone who understood their true significance. He didn't respond right away. He knew there were things that couldn't be said on paper, things that had to be spoken in person, looking directly into her eyes. As they both waited for the exam results, Emily and Benjamin found themselves trapped in a shared restlessness, each in their own space, yet connected by a thread woven from hope, mutual admiration, and something neither of them had dared to name just yet. But deep down, they knew. When the results came, it wouldn't just mark a turning point in Emily's journey. It would also be the inevitable moment when they would have to face what had been growing between them all along, nurtured by letters, quiet glances, and unspoken gestures. It was close, very close. Spring was in full bloom in Virginia. The gardens at Harrington Estate were flourishing, as if they too sensed that a new chapter in Emily Carter's life was about to begin. That morning, she received a letter bearing the emblem of the University of Virginia School of Medicine on the envelope. Her hands trembled as she opened it, her heart racing. Just the first few lines were enough to bring tears to her eyes. "We are pleased to confirm your acceptance into the University of Virginia School of Medicine with a full scholarship." She pressed the letter to her chest, letting the emotion pour out. For a moment, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears of relief and triumph. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every letter exchanged with Benjamin, it had all led to this moment. Without hesitation, she made a decision that had been quietly forming in her heart for days. Before telling her family, before sharing the news with her classmates, she knew exactly where she needed to go. Back to Harrington Estate. Benjamin was in the library, reviewing foundation reports, when he heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. His heart skipped a beat, as if it instinctively knew that this sound meant far more than an ordinary visit. He stood up, walked through the hallway, and opened the front door. There she was. Emily stood at the threshold, her face lit up with a radiant smile, still damp with tears she could barely contain. She held the acceptance letter firmly, like a trophy earned through grit, sacrifice, and hope. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Emily broke the silence, lifting the envelope with restrained pride. "I got in," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Benjamin couldn't hold back the smile that spread across his face. Warm, genuine, the kind that had become rare for him in recent years. "I always knew you would," he replied, stepping forward. Following the pull of his heart, he wrapped her in a tight embrace. Emily, surprised at first, quickly melted into it, feeling the strength of his arms and the comforting warmth of his chest against hers. "I had to tell you in person," she whispered, her voice muffled against his shirt. "And I needed to see you," Benjamin answered, his tone rich with sincerity that felt like a confession. They parted just enough to look into each other's eyes. There was a familiarity between them now, matured in the silence of long nights and the space of meaningful absence. A mutual recognition that needed no further explanation. Benjamin led her to the library, where the fireplace crackled softly, as if it too had been waiting for this reunion. Emily handed him the acceptance letter, and he held it as if it were a sacred artifact. "You didn't just succeed, Emily," he said, his voice tender. "You brought light back to this place and reignited something inside me I thought had been gone for a long time." Her heart pounded at his words. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but they weren't born of fear or exhaustion. They were sweet tears, born of something real, something profound. "Benjamin," she began, hesitating. He intertwined his fingers with hers, offering her silent encouragement. "I know my life is going to change a lot from here on out," she continued, steady now. "But there's something I don't want to leave behind, something I can't bear to lose, no matter how far the future takes me." Benjamin gazed at her, as if the world around them had fallen away. "I don't want to leave you behind," she finished, her voice unwavering, her eyes locked on his. That was all it took, as if every wall that had separated them crumbled in that instant. Benjamin stepped forward and finally closed the distance between them with a kiss. It wasn't rushed or impulsive. It was the culmination of sleepless nights, whispered hopes hidden between the lines of letters, shared silences, and an admiration that had grown into something undeniable. When they parted, Emily's eyes shone with an intensity that made Benjamin's chest tighten. "I always believed in you," he said, still holding her hands. "But I never imagined that somewhere along the way, I'd find someone who would change my path too." She smiled, feeling that all the battles had finally given way to a new beginning, one that she wouldn't have to walk alone. That afternoon, as they strolled together through the estate's garden, beneath a gentle rain of cherry blossom petals, no more words were needed. The comfortable silence that surrounded them said everything. They had won. They had found each other. And most importantly, they both knew that every step from now on would be taken side by side. Graduation day dawned bright over Charlottesville, as if the entire sky had decided to join in the celebration. The university buildings were adorned with banners and flowers, and the campus buzzed with life. Families crossed the blooming gardens carrying balloons, bouquets, and, above all, expressions of pure pride. A large banner hung over the stage in the main auditorium, with golden letters that read, "Congratulations, Doctors of Tomorrow." Emily slipped into her deep navy blue gown in front of the simple mirror in her room. Her fingers brushed over the fabric with a mixture of reverence and disbelief, as if she still couldn't fully grasp that this moment had truly arrived. For a few seconds, she stared at her reflection and finally allowed the emotion to reach her. It wasn't just the reflection of a graduate she saw. It was the image of a warrior who had conquered every battle life had thrown her way. It was the daughter who carried the weight and pride of her family in Alabama on her chest. It was Emily Carter, the same girl who had once swept the hallways of a distant mansion while dreaming of this very day. In the audience, seated in the front rows, were her mother Evelyn and her siblings, Mia and Joshua, barely able to hold back tears. Evelyn clutched her youngest hand tightly while keeping the other pressed to her heart, as if afraid it might burst with pride. Joshua, now a teenager, grinned from ear to ear, as if his sister's triumph was his own. A little farther back, quietly positioned among local business leaders and representatives from the Educational Foundation, was Benjamin Harrington. He had declined the seats of honor, preferring to watch from a distance, without fanfare. Even so, the pride in his eyes was unmistakable, so vivid it seemed as though he himself were about to walk across that stage. When Emily's name echoed through the auditorium, Benjamin felt his chest swell. She crossed the stage with steady steps, chin lifted and a smile that lit up the entire room. She received her diploma from the dean's hands, and as she raised it high in the air, her eyes instinctively searched for Benjamin, and she found him. His gaze met hers like a silent embrace amidst the crowd. In that moment, every word they could have spoken faded into silence, eclipsed by the connection between them. Emily smiled, not just with her mouth, but with her eyes and her entire heart. Benjamin smiled back, and she felt it again, that unmistakable warmth of his unwavering support, even from afar. After the ceremony, Emily was surrounded by family and classmates, everyone congratulating her with joy. She hugged her mother tightly, allowing herself to finally cry without restraint. They were tears of relief, of happiness, of triumph. Joshua, excited, showed her a drawing he had made especially for her. Emily wearing her white coat, surrounded by smiling patients. She kissed his forehead and tucked the drawing alongside her diploma, as if it were a treasured talisman. Yet amid all the celebration, her eyes continued to search for Benjamin. She found him outside, beneath the shade of a large flowering tree, standing slightly apart from the crowd. He watched the joyful chaos with a soft smile, though the emotion in his eyes left no doubt about what he was feeling. Emily walked toward him, diploma still in hand. When she reached him, she looked up with a calm expression, heavy with meaning. "This," she began, lifting the diploma, "is ours." Benjamin took her hands, holding the diploma with her. "No," he replied gently. "This is yours. Your merit, your strength. I was just lucky enough to witness you conquer the world." Emily shook her head with a sweet smile, never breaking eye contact. "Maybe, but you were the bridge that got me here. And I want to keep walking with you, Benjamin, if you'll have me." He looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race, just like so many times before. With tenderness, he brushed his fingers along the side of her face and replied without hesitation, "More than what? I needed to be that way." In that moment, surrounded by spring blossoms and the distant echoes of celebration, Benjamin Harrington leaned in and kissed her. It was a kiss full of everything they had lived through: respect, admiration, desire, and promise. Applause and laughter drifted in the background, but for them, there was only the sound of shared victory and the racing beat of their hearts. There, beneath that tree in full bloom, Emily Carter and Benjamin Harrington sealed not just the most emotional chapter of their lives so far, but the beginning of a new story. A story they would now write together, page by page, as equals, as partners, as something the universe had brought together with quiet, unwavering wisdom. Graduation had become a vivid memory in Emily Carter's heart, but it didn't signal rest. For her, it was only the beginning. As soon as the applause faded and her diploma was carefully tucked away, Emily dove headfirst into her medical residency at the Central Hospital in Charlottesville. The long shifts, the challenging cases, and the countless nights spent studying weren't a burden. They were simply the natural continuation of the path she had chosen for herself. And she walked it with certainty. She was not walking alone. Benjamin Harrington had been by her side from the very first step of this journey. At the end of each grueling shift, even when her body ached with exhaustion, she knew someone would be there waiting for her. Benjamin wasn't just a spectator in her story. He was part of it in every way that mattered. He was there day after day, listening intently to every story about remarkable patients, celebrating each small victory that, for Emily, meant far more than a checkbox. They were milestones. He listened with attentive eyes and an open heart, understanding that every story she told was another brick in something much larger they've been building together since the beginning. One quiet evening, as they sat reviewing notes on community health projects, Emily spoke again of a dream that had never truly left her. The idea of a community clinic had always been there, quiet but persistent, like a seed waiting for the right moment to bloom. Now, with her medical knowledge and hands-on experience, she felt ready to make it real. Benjamin didn't just support the idea. He embraced it with the same passion she brought to it. Together, they outlined detailed plans to bring it to life. They chose the location for the clinic, launched fundraising campaigns, and rallied key connections Benjamin had fostered over years in business and philanthropy. Their planning sessions became a shared ritual, not just the birth of a project, but the shaping of a future they both wanted with all their hearts. At the inauguration of the Carter Harrington Community Clinic, the emotion in the air was unmistakable. Locals gathered in droves to see the facility that promised more than just health care. It promised dignity, access, and hope. Emily, in a crisp white coat, walked the freshly painted halls with a light in her eyes that no sleepless night could dim. She introduced each section of the clinic with pride, from the pediatric wing to the preventative care offices, describing the initiatives that would ensure quality health care for everyone, regardless of their financial means. Benjamin watched her with his chest full of pride, each word she spoke echoing like a victory anthem. There stood the woman he had watched rise step by step, from the sleepless study nights at Harrington Estate to the respected physician now leading her own clinic. She had overcome every obstacle, rewritten her destiny, and was now reshaping the lives of those lucky enough to cross her path. When the time came for the opening speech, Emily stood before the crowd with the calm confidence of someone speaking straight from the heart. Her eyes scanned the faces before her until they found Benjamin's, seated in the front row, his gaze brimming with emotion. "This clinic isn't just a building," she began, her voice clear and strong. "It's living proof that when we believe in our dreams and find people willing to walk beside us, we can change realities. I'm living proof of that. And I hope this place becomes, for everyone who walks through these doors, a reminder that hope always exists." The applause that followed echoed through the walls of the clinic, not just for the space itself, but for the journey that had led there. Emily stepped down from the small stage and, without hesitation, made her way to Benjamin, who welcomed her with a smile as sincere as the emotion beating in his chest. He wrapped her in an embrace that said more than words ever could, an embrace filled with pride, affection, and a serene joy that only true love can bring. "Emily Carter," he whispered, resting his forehead against hers as the applause still rang out. "You've changed my life more than I ever thought possible." She smiled, eyes misty with emotion that brimmed in every word and every touch. "Benjamin Harrington, you didn't just believe in me when I doubted myself. You walked with me every step of the way. You helped build this future, our future." There, surrounded by doctors, patients, and the hope that filled every corner of the clinic, they sealed the moment with a kiss laden with meaning. It was the beginning of a new phase, one where the chapters would be written side by side, with love, purpose, and an unshakable certainty that together they could reach what once seemed impossible. The end. What did you think of this story? Let us know in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. See you next time.